Welcome back to Captain Rook's Reading Corner. We've been working our way through Treasure Island, and when last we left, Jim Hawkins was taking control of the ship. So get yourself a good warm drink. Things are getting exciting. Chapter 14, Israel Hands. There's a picture of the head of the chapter. Hans rolled his eyes around and stared at me. "Much hurt?" I asked him. He grunted. "I don't have no luck, and that's what's the matter with me." He nodded toward the man with the red cap. "As for that swab, he's good and dead, he is. O'Brien warn't no sailor anyhow. And where might you have come from?" "Well," said I, "I've come aboard to take this ship, Mr. Hans. You'll please call me Captain." He looked at me sourly, but said nothing. "By the by," I said, pointing to the Jolly Roger, "I can't have these colours, Mr. Hans. I'll strike 'em. Better none than these." I ran to the flag lines, brought down their black flag, and chucked it overboard. "God save the King," said I, waving my cap. He watched me keenly and slyly. "I reckon, Captain Hawkins," he said, "you'll want to get ashore now. S'pose we talks?" "Why, with all my heart, Mr. Hans. Say on." "Now look here. You gives me food and drink, and a old handkerchief to tie my wound up, and I'll tell you how to sail her." "I'm not going back to the cove," says I. "We'll sail into North Inlet and beach her quietly there." "North Inlet? Why, I'll help you sail her there, I will," he said. We struck our bargain on the spot. In 3 minutes I had the Hispaniola sailing easily along the western coast, toward the North Inlet that I had seen on the map. Then I went below to my own cabin, where I got a soft silk handkerchief of my mother's. I bound up Hans' great bleeding stab wound in his thigh. I drank some cool water and ate some biscuits. Both of us were feeling better. Here's a picture of him. The breeze served us well. Soon we had turned the corner of the rocky hill that ends the island on the north. I was enjoying my role as captain. I had plenty of water and good things to eat. The weather was pleasant. The only thing that bothered me was Israel Hands' odd smile as he watched and watched and watched me at my work. We reached the North Inlet, but of course had no anchor to let down. In order to beach the ship, we would have to wait for the tide to go out. Here's Jim Hawkins at the wheel with a bit of map. We both sat in silence over a meal. Then Hans said, with his same strange smile, "This here's an unlucky ship, this Hispaniola, Jim. I never seen such dirty luck, not I. There was this here O'Brien, now. He's dead, ain't he? Do you take it as a dead man is dead for good, or do he come alive again?" "You can kill the body, Mr. Hans, but not the spirit," I replied. "O'Brien is there in another world and may be watching us." "Ah," says he. "Well, I do know one thing, I do. Dead men don't bite. That's my view. Amen, so be it. Now, Jim, I'll take it kind if you'd step down into that there cabin and get me a bottle of wine." I knew he just wanted me to leave the deck. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "All right, Mr. Hans," I answered, "but I'll have to dig for it." I scuttled down the stairs and tried to make a lot of noise. Then I slipped off my shoes, ran quietly along the next ladder, and popped my head out of the opening beyond him. He was on his hands and knees. I watched as he pulled himself across the deck and picked a bloody dirk, a 10-inch knife, out of a coil rope. He hid it in his jacket and crawled back to his old place. So, Israel Hands could move about, and he was now armed with a dirk. I quietly crept back, slipped into my shoes, and grabbed a bottle of wine. I came up the ladder and found Hans just as I had left him. "Here's luck," he said, taking a swig of the wine. "The tide's out now. You just take my orders, Captain Hawkins, and we'll sail slap in and be done with it." I was a good sub-captain, and Hans was an excellent pilot. "Starboard a little. So. Steady," he commanded. "Starboard. Larboard a little. Steady. Steady." We went about and dodged in near the shore. "Now, my hearty luff." I pulled hard, and the Hispaniola swung round rapidly and went straight for the sandy shore. With all the excitement, I forgot to watch Hans. When I looked round, he was already halfway toward me with the dirk in his right hand. We both cried out when our eyes met. Mine was the shrill cry of terror. His was a roar of fury like a charging bull's. He lunged forward, and I leaped sideways. I drew a pistol from my belt, took a cool aim and drew the trigger, but there was no flash. The powder was wet from the seawater. Why had I not cleaned and reloaded my only weapons? Although he was wounded, Hans moved quickly. His grizzled hair tumbled over his red, furious face. I knew my pistols were useless, and I knew I could be boxed in against the side of the ship. If that happened, 9 or 10 inches of the blood-stained dirk would be my last experience on this side of life. I placed my palms against the mainmast and waited, every nerve upon the stretch. Here they are, dodging each other. Hans also paused. He moved to the right. I moved to the left. Right, left, back again. It was like two boys at play dodging around the rocks back home at Black Hill Cove. But you may be sure no boy's heart had ever beat so wildly. I saw no hope of any escape. Suddenly, the Hispaniola struck the beach. The ship shook and leaned over on her side. Water splashed onto the deck. We were tossed in an instant and rolled, almost together, down the deck. The dead redcaps tumbled stiffly after us. My head hit Israel Hans' foot with a crack that made my teeth rattle. I got to my feet, but Hans was tangled with the dead body. I could not run on the tilted deck, and Hans was coming at me with his dirk. Quick as thought, I sprang into the mizzen shrouds, climbed up hand over hand, and did not draw breath till I was seated on the cross trees. The dirk had struck the mast not half a foot below me, and there stood Israel Hans with his mouth open and his face looking up at mine. Now that I had a moment to myself, I loaded my pistols, but Hans had also hauled himself into the shrouds. With the dirk in his teeth, he began slowly and painfully to climb. With the pistol in either hand, I addressed him. "One more step, Mr. Hans," said I, "and I'll shoot. Dead men don't bite, you know." He stopped instantly. I could see by his face that he was trying to think, and this was a slow process for him. His expression made me laugh aloud. He took the dirk from his mouth and said, "Jim, I don't have no luck, not I, but I reckon I'll have to strike. That comes hard, you see, for a master sailor to kill a good boy like you, Jim." I was smiling, listening to him and feeling cocky, when, in a flash, back went his right hand over his shoulder. Something sang like an arrow through the air. I felt a blow and then a sharp pang, and there I was, pinned by the shoulder to the mast. In the horrid pain and surprise of the moment, both my pistols went off, and both dropped out of my hands. They did not fall alone. With a choked cry, Israel Hans let go of the shroud and plunged headfirst into the water. From my perch on the leaning cross trees, I could see him lying on the clean, bright sand, as fishes swam over and around him. I felt sick, faint, and terrified. Hot blood was running over my back and chest. The dirk that pinned my shoulder to the mast burned like a hot iron. I clung with both hands till my nails ached, and I shut my eyes until I could regain my senses. The thought of pulling the dirk from my shoulder made me shudder. Oddly enough, the knife only held me by a mere pinch of skin, and the shudder tore the skin loose. I ripped my shirt away from the knife and climbed down the shrouds to the deck. I went below to my cabin and tended to my wound. Then I cleared the deck of its last passenger, the dead man, O'Brien. With one good heave, I tumbled him overboard. I could see him and Israel lying side by side under the water, and the quick fishes steering to and fro over them. Well, it's a lucky thing he's not much hurt. That could have gone worse. But he's got the full ship to himself now, beached as it is. There's been more excitement coming up soon. I'll be seeing you next chapter.